This video focuses on defining functions and how we can interpret or tell if different relationships are functions or not. First, we need to know the definition of a function. A function is any relationship between two variables, usually x and y, where each input, the x value, produces exactly one output. Functions could be really simple relationships, they could be very complicated relationships. But the key is that if any relationship has only one y value attached to each of the x values, then we know that could be called a function. If we see any x value or any input that produces more than one output or more than one y value attached to each x, then we know the relationship is not a function. Why do we care about functions? Functions are about certainty or making predictions. If we know the input, x, and the function rule, then we can predict the value of the output with 100% certainty. Once we know the x, we will find out what the y is right away. We see two examples here of relationships that could be considered functions or not functions based on our definition. Here's the blue relationship from the prior video and the red relationship from the prior video, and their tables that are completed. The blue relationship would meet the definition of a function. That's because when we look at the mapping, every single x value only has one line leaving it. That tells us each x only has one y value associated with it. If we look at the table, we see each x value only shows up once in the table. That's telling us each of these inputs only gets one output. But when we look at the red relationship, we know it's not a function. If we look at the mapping, we see x values that map to two different y values, or an input of 3 has two possible outputs with it. If we look to the table, we see those x values that have two possible y values. That same x value appears more than once. 6 appears twice in the table as an x because it has two different outputs, and 3 appears in our table 2 different times because it has two possible outputs. Because of that, we know relationship R is not a function. If I told you the input were 3, you would not be able to predict for certainty whether the output would be -1 or +1.